All righty then. And so let me bring us in here. Okay, here we go. President Donald Trump on Monday agreed to a 30-day pause on his tariff threats against Mexico and Canada as America's two biggest trading partners took steps to appease him over border security and drug trafficking. The 30-day pauses are a cool-down period that puts us at the cusp of a trade war that risked crushing economic growth, causing inflation, and ending alliances with the United States' I would say, two closest allies. I'm very pleased with this initial outcome, and the tariffs announced on Saturday will be paused for a 30-day period to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured. Trump said, "Fairness for all," he said in all caps, whatever that means. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, posted the pause would occur while we work together, saying that his government will name a fentanyl czar, not a czarina, but we could have a czarina, list Mexican cartels as terrorist groups, and launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. What, no Space Force? The pause followed a similar move with Mexico that allows for a period of negotiations over drug smuggling and illegal migration. The 10% tariff that Trump slapped on China, however, is still going to go into effect this week, although Trump plans to talk to Chinese President Xi Jinping during the next few days, and the Chinese seem confident that they're going to be able to talk Trump off the ledge here. While the trade war was feared by investors, companies, and political leaders, now seems less likely to erupt. That doesn't mean that the drama is over. Canada and Mexico bought some additional time, but Trump could easily renew his tariffs and already wants to announce taxes on imports from the European Union. Remember when Europe was our ally? All of this leaves the global economy uncertain about whether a crisis has been averted or if possible catastrophe still looms. Joining us to talk about this is Aquiles Larrea. He's CEO and founder of Larrea Wealth Management. He's the author of the book, Your Money and You, The Ultimate Guide for Latino Entrepreneurs. Aquiles, thank you very much for joining us here on the TMI show.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you. So, Aquiles, do you think, what do you think is going to happen at the end of let's start with Canada and Mexico. 30-day pause, is it going to be extended? Or is it just going to, is there going to be some sort of agreement here? Or could we still be staring down the barrel of some tariffs?
Anything's possible at this particular point. I think that the 30 days gives them a little bit more time to, hey, let's slow down a little bit. Let's open the channels of communication, which is never a bad thing. And at the end of the day, isn't this about money? Because that's what it feels like to me. You know, are we going to get a bigger slice of the pie and render unto the U.S. what is it, the U.S. at this particular point? That's my opinion on this at this particular point. I think that at long term, in terms of an agreement on tariffs, let's go on the positive side first. We come to an agreement at the 30th day, or we extend it out 60 more days, and we keep the lines of communication open, then that's going to be a boom to us, because that means Canada and Mexico are saying, hey, we're open to the possibility. Let's see what we can do together without us, meaning Canada and Mexico, losing our sovereignty, not feeling like we are part of a deal. My attorney a long time ago would say, hey, a good deal is where one person walks away and their arm isn't hurting, or their face isn't hurting because they got slapped. But on the bad side, let's go to if it turns out in a bad way, then we're looking at an increase in pricing. We're looking at an increase in inflation, which is going to be bad all around and could put us into a recession, guys, because these are the things when you start getting negative growth, all around GDP, that's the classic definition of a recession, and we want to avoid that at all costs. Yes, I understand that the Trump organization is trying to make the Trump presidency is trying to make its mark early and fast, which he said, none of this is a surprise, guys. He's been along. So nothing he's saying is out of the ordinary. Though I do say the Gaza thing took me a little bit by surprise. But, at the end of the day, it is money. We are talking about, if I'm an entrepreneur, like Trump is, if I'm an entrepreneur, good or bad, and we're making money, you're going to look good to the American people because we perceive we're making money.
Yeah. I mean, also, I mean, I kind of want to break these down because we have situations with now Canada, Mexico, China, and the EU, and I don't know, Vanuatu can not be far behind, right? So with Canada, I'm mystified because I mean, by all accounts, less than 1% of the fentanyl that enters the United States enters through Canada, and basically nobody's sneaking from Canada into the United States. I mean, maybe 6 people. I mean, just nobody. So what was that all about, really? I mean, what did Trump really, why is he messing with the Canadians? The Mexico thing, I understand. It's well established. Fentanyl, drugs, blah, 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 blah. Migration, I get it. That, I just don't get what that's about.
Well, it seems to me that what it's about is, once again, we started with Mexico. He's thinking, let's start with Mexico. Let's work with the war on drugs again. Going back to the classic Republican themes of the day,
Mm-hmm.
And so Canada would be another way for Mexico, the cartels in Mexico, to start bringing and funneling in drugs. So they'd have ships or what have you go up to Vancouver, go up to the Northeast Corridor, and bring it down that way. So he's thinking, I'm gonna, or who knows what he's thinking. But like you said, Canada has no viable malfeasance at this point,
Right.
to say, I think it's more important. Look,
It's like
what
if I
he's
just
done
started
with
hitting my cat
Colombia.
it's like if I just started beating my cat over the head, he'd be so confused. He's like, I don't do anything wrong.
And this is a classic Trump move because he does the same thing all the time. He does the sensationalism, and then you have to ask yourself, well, okay, but what's really behind this?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look, he already slapped a tariff on Colombia, all right, at 25%, which is a major drug haven. All right. So what we see is a precursor. We saw a precursor of Canada and Mexico at this particular point. But like you said, there's not too much to gain in Canada at this particular point. I think that he's sending the message out, hey, the free ride is over. In his eyes, the free
Mm-hmm.
ride is over, but he doesn't realize that these tariffs are going to do more damage to us as a consumer than really help us. Let's go back to, let's just say the 1920s or 1910, when they started using, before the IRS was in vogue,
Right.
tariffs were the way that revenue was brought into the United States, right? You didn't have big government,
Mm-hmm.
so the Republicans
You
would think, hey,
couldn't
this
have
is,
big government because we didn't have enough revenue.
of course. And they're thinking, hey, why don't we bring us back to those days?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times, we just have to point back to history. Smoot-Hawley Act, classic definition. They brought that act into play, slapped tariffs where you could, and it drove us depression. Okay, we were already in a depression. It made the situation even worse, and Hoover did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So at this particular point, I'm scratching my head. Is this a warning to China and Russia? Russia really doesn't have any goods per se, on a large scale that they're bringing into us. But
Yeah.
are we sending that shot across the bow saying, hey, here we are, remember who we are, and let's try to, understand each other better? And I think with China, it's more a piece of the pie kind
It
of thing.
also feels like
Yeah.
fighting the last war, right? I mean, look, I'm from the Rust Belt. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. It's no place has been more devastated than Dayton, Ohio, by globalization and outsourcing and deindustrialization. So, I have sympathy for protectionism. But that said, it feels like the horse has fled the barn. right? I mean, if tariffs might have had a place against like Japan for dumping steel in the 70s and 80s, for example, or for against China when China first was admitted to the WTO in the 80s and 90s, and they weren't admitting American goods, and we had a massive trade deficit. That probably would have been something that the Bush one and the Clinton administrations ought to have considered. But it just seems like now, I mean, I'm sorry, Dayton ain't never coming back, you know?
Neither is Pittsburgh.
Right.
We're looking at the same scenarios here. If you could imagine our special forces coming into a building to clear it out of bad guys, and the bad guys left 6 months ago.